So hey anime ANS. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem Carmela, Charlie, and Lucifer. So let's start the series. We have not the data even in the event that it was only a native of misery that made the kill, but you would have us focus on a moron intend to go after the great host on the following elimination day, noticed Zestial, taking a gander at the most youthful master in heck. Even among the three freshest masters she was a simple kid contrasted with them, including their human lives. Valentino was very nearly 50 years of age, and Vox was a bit north of 80, Velvet, by examination, was a simple 26 years of age, even more amazing that she was the V's spine, as he would see it. A determined young lady like her were a unique case, even in a cutting-edge age, actually. I've seen better disloyalty endeavors and traps in youngsters than this one, my dear. What's it matter on the off chance that it was a delinquent or not who made the kill? They can fucking pass on, that is the only thing that is important. We don't have to fear the winged fucks any longer. Broadcasted Velvet, signaling with an open hand to the executed head she had tossed onto the table. Internally, she was fuming over his calling her out on their hurriedly created plan to captivate most masters to focus on a destined attack on the exterminators. The greater amount of them who were killed, the less they needed to battle to assume control over their domains and spirits. Still, perhaps she could rescue this and filthy his rep. What's the matter, old folk? Heart giving out, balls contracting at the prospect of dirtying your hands in heavenly messenger blood? Is it safe to say that you are that a very remarkable weakling? Carmilla looked fit to spit fire, and Zestial was opening his mouth to answer, before his face froze. Discreetly he stood and brought down his head. Carmilla took a gander at her companion and saw his eyes were shut. Zestial. He draws near, he articulated, getting a look of understanding from Carmilla before she stood and brought down her head too. A few of the more seasoned masters immediately acknowledged what was happening and took cues from them, while Alastair, in spite of not knowing, rushed to follow. He might not understand what was happening, yet probably the most remarkable masters in damnation were standing and bowing their heads. Each master had their pride, so for them to bow their heads was definitely not a decent sign. Best to follow the gathering for this situation. Ideally, it would put him on the great side of whoever was liable for this. Velvet was going to speak up and deride the fossils for their trepidation and regard, before the entryway behind her were flawlessly opened. A thick red haze surged out from the entryway, covering the floor in it. At first Velvet thought Valentino had appeared, until she got a whiff on the smoke. Val's was intended to make one smell their most agreeable recollections, as well as their most exciting ones, a truly compelling love potion, one that mixed solace and excitement, while additionally being habit-forming as anything could be. This smoke didn't resemble any of that. It resembled iron and passing. It resembled blood. Turning, she saw a tall figure, without a doubt taller than Vox, wearing what resembled a shroud of most flawless shadows, streaming down from his shoulders. A hood covered his head from her view at the point he was at. The dark shadows transformed into the red smoke as it arrived at the floor. Beside that she could see the darkened steel plate on his chest and gloves of comparative steel on his hands, the fingers finishing off with evil places, looking like the hooks so many miscreant had. His legs were covered in a bunch of greaves and cuisse of a similar steel, covering him from neck to toe in obscured plate defensive layer and shrouding shadows. On his back rested a long and huge sword, the sharp edge concealed in a sheath made of what resembled a solitary enormous hellhound. Velvet looked as he moved to the top of the table, defensive layer clanging daintily as he did. When he arrived at Carmilla, he halted and gave the lady a conventional bow, prior to grasping her hand and kissing the rear of her hand. "Dearest Carmilla, it has been many years. How have you been, my dear?" asked the figure, his voice a strong and controlled manly tone. He seemed as though he was talking delicately, as though in dread on the off chance that he addressed uproariously, he would hurt individuals. "Fine, my dear, presently could you, if it's not too much trouble, bring down your hood? There are many new faces among our number, and they should know your face," she answered, getting a half bow thusly, before he went to confront the table. When he did, he pulled back his hood, uncovering his face to them all. His face was what many could call attractive, being a dark red variety on his skin, while his eyes were a dynamic blue on yellowed scara with dark students. His hair was serious areas of strength for a variety, equaled exclusively by the morning stars in Heck, with two conspicuous horns on the highest point of his head. He looked a lot like them. In the event that she tell the truth, however, that was unimaginable, in light of the fact that Lucifer and Lilith just had one youngster in Heck, and that was that Charlie bitch, correct? "I go by Naruto Uzumaki, Master of War. It's a delight to see a few lifelong companions and meet a few new colleagues. Specifically, it's great to see you, Zestial, after the many years I've been away," he broadcasted prior to coming over to shake the taller master's hand, getting a return shake in remuneration for his coming to. Before he detected another close buddy, "Rosie, my dear, how is Barbarian Town nowadays? As blood-doused as I recollect?" "It's very spotless nowadays, my sweetheart, it's such a ton more pleasant that way," she answered with a smile, prior to looking at the rest and seeing some eagerness on their faces. "We should save the gathering for later and return to the matter in question." G. concurred. "Presently, who killed this exorcist?" he asked, looking at the head on the table. When he did, one of his hands moved aside of his shroud. "Obscure, we couldn't say whether it was a miscreant who killed them, or on the other hand on the off chance that this was a backstabber being put somewhere near the superb host," answered Zestial, receiving a shaken head consequently. "Thus, we don't have the foggiest idea who killed this one then." At that point, he followed off, before a savage smile overwhelmed his face. "Okay, you're all in karma." His arms suddenly erupted from underneath his shroud, throwing an assortment of comparative things to the one on the table. Arrival by the one head velvet tossed, were 5 more exorcist heads. Everyone's eyes were gone to him then, at that point, just to notice his smile. "I know precisely who killed these 5, and spoilers, he's in the room with you," Naruto announced, standing tall and folding his arms across his chest. "You killed these 5, my kid? Your power has certainly filled in your time away," remarked Zestial, his shining yellow eyes locked on to his most established partner. The two of them rose to noticeable quality among the masters around a similar time. However, his companion was as yet a young fellow at that point, so he had encouraged the more youthful man, undoubtedly somewhat, and shown him a portion of the better purposes of a driving and governing his area. He kept on calling him his kid meanwhile, somewhat on the grounds that Naruto let him, the other part since it was valid. The marginally more youthful master was the nearest he had at any point come to a child, thus he kept on alluding to him thusly. "It has yet that is not the manner in which I killed them," Naruto answered, prior to coming to his back and eliminating the monstrous sword from its belt around his chest, taking the sheath with it. Now that they could see it, it was certainly a hellhound holding the sword in its mouth. The handle and cross-watchman were gigantic, equivalent to the tremendous sword he used. With one hand, he pulled the sheath away from the edge, uncovering the totally enormous sharp edge inside. By all privileges, it ought not be feasible for him to employ a sword that huge. However, he used it effortlessly. Taking a gander at the edge, they could see that it had all the earmarks of being made of the very obscured metal that the shield he wore was. "This is the means by which I killed them. For the beyond 50 years, I've been scouring the external scopes of the Pride Ring for the insider facts that the wrongdoings and Ars Goetia covered when the eradication started, insider facts that let the miscreants and damnation brought into the world of the days of yore, before even my and Zestial's time, stand against the holy messengers without risk of punishment and rebellion. After 50 years of digging through ruins and covered remains, I at long last found it, the techniques our ancestors used to retaliate, women, refined men, and unpredictable others. I provide for you the weapons that will allow us to retaliate and safeguard our workers, defiled saintly steel, the solution to sky celestial steel, he proclaimed, as a shadowy air assumed control over the cutting edge and made a sensation of dread and demise occupy the room, making a couple of the more vulnerable masters shift in their seats at the believing the sword put off. And you simply anticipate that we should purchase that, came the distrusting voice of the most youthful in the room, provoking a look towards her. She looked unequivocally unmoved, gazing at him with the most exhausted look. She appeared to be ready to marshal. Sorry, ya fossil. Yet I ain't getting it till I see proof of it working like you say it does. On the off chance that anybody in this room had said anything less, I'd have taken their heads and watched all of you battle about the pieces, he proclaimed, stunning most at his dull statement of his eagerness to kill anybody in the room. Carmilla's head dropped into her hands. Zestial simply tasted his tea. Rosie immediately caught one of the heads for a fast tidbit, and Alastair's smile broadened a smidgen more. No, young woman, I came ready. Helbrecht, Sigismund, get the models. The entryway pummeled open, a couple of enormous figures obstructing the entryway. When the figures ventured through, they were taking a gander at a couple of huge delinquents in dark reinforcement with white pauldrons, a dark shroud over their left arms. Between them, nonetheless, drew the consideration of the vast majority of the room. A couple of battling exorcists, deprived of weapons, protection, and clearly garments, both were bound and choked, with injuries and slashes covering their bodies. The main thing left on them were their underpants, scanty however they were, and the chains that kept them bound to the huge miscreants who held them. Well, a live show. How engaging! Enthused Alastair, eyes locked on the two officers holding the 2 points. They were hazardous, he could feel it. It seemed like 2 additional masters had strolled into the room. In the event that these were master-level miscreants, how strong was their master? Presently then, women, I trust you've partaken in your visit with my men. Until further notice however, I bid you goodbye, and better fortune in the following life, he pronounced, prior to removing the head from the first in a solitary swing. Seeing her kindred exorcist really kick the bucket from the miscreant's hand froze the subsequent heavenly messenger, before she imploded to her knees while gazing at her kindred heavenly messenger's body, which was releasing brilliant blood all around the floor. What's more, presently I need to pay to have blood wiped off of the floor. It's not modest to get blood off marble, Naruto, said Carmilla, raising her voice at her long-lasting partner. She wasn't vexed, just marginally irritated about the blood in her number 1 gathering room, and that he killed one preceding asking her. It was normal kindness, ask before you murder in another's home. Even Alastair adhered to that unwritten guideline, and he was excruciating a fraction of the time. Send me the charge, you know I'm great for it, I'll come up with all required funds. You realize I will, he countered, getting a gesture of her head thusly. As he turned around to confront the subsequent holy messenger, he saw something entertaining and exceptionally fascinating. Her wings, a previous delicate white in the wake of cleaning the dark color out, were presently draining a blood red. Alrighty then, what do we have here? That is new, mumbled Carmilla, approaching reserve him. The 2 of them looked as her wings got done with draining red, before she went to confront the master of war and the arms managing master. To the shock of everybody in the room, she did homage her knees before him, stifled words being heard from behind her fabric gag. Naruto, amazing the rest further, arrived at down to eliminate it, permitting them to hear her mumbling at long last. Blood for the master of blood, favored be his name, and may he concede me the leniency I request, she was murmuring, prior to rehashing it like a mantra. calm enough that most couldn't hear her. Naruto's eyes limited, nonetheless, at the name. No one except for his most faithful knew that name. So how did this irregular holy messenger? How charming! Helbrecht, Sigismund, return her to the phalanx, have her contained in a high-need cell. No one except for me is permitted to see her. Bring in the first and second organizations to help you. In the event that anybody gives you poo or attempts to stop you, kill them. I need her protected when I return, and get her a few garments, food and water, requested the fair, his two troopers snapping into movement. In no time, a dark pack was over her head, and a dark shroud was covering her structure and new wings from sight. Inside snapshots of dress her, they were back out of the entryway with her between them, making rapidly for the lift. With the diversion over, Carmilla and Naruto shared a look. Before Carmilla turned around to the table, this gathering is finished. Have a decent day everybody. Naruto, Zestial, accompany me, please. With that the three masters, alongside Carmilla's two little girls, withdrew further into the structure, the entryway closing behind them. Belvette left rapidly, acknowledging she needed to impart these disclosures to Vox and Valentino rapidly, and they expected to get their hands on some ruined radiant steel at the earliest opportunity. In the event that they could get it before most of these failures, the fate of Agony's pride ring was theirs. Alastair rapidly shadow went out, taking the egg kid with him by unadulterated possibility of it clutching him. As he left the structure, the two troopers were no place in sight, reviling inside. He shadow ventured out back to the front entryway of the lodging, hustling back to his ongoing home, taking the egg young men when he did as Forthright had waved the rest over. He must be distant from everyone else and think. These disclosures required his prompt consideration. Alastair, neglected to dispose of the eggs. I see, came the voice of Vaggie, precisely what he didn't require at the present time. Indeed, all things considered, the little beasts demonstrated rather decent, and somewhat valuable, statements of regret. However, it's been a fairly drawn-out day. I want some rest. Don't upset me, please, he answered, his voice rather cut yet at the same time respectful. He disappeared with that, leaving a befuddled entryway. Indeed, that was peculiar. What unusual thing has him up in a pack? Asked Holy Messenger Dust, having never seen the radio evil presence even somewhat irritated by anything, for him to plunge out that way. Something abnormal had occurred. Goodness gracious. At the master meeting, a blondie fellow killed an exorcist with a peculiar sword, flaunted the heads of 5 more in bizarre steel, and even took another with him, one with red wings. It was extremely bizarre. Shouted Plain, waving his hand up high as he did. What? A blondie fellow, killed an exorcist? Did he seem to be her however more limited? Asked Vaggie, pointing at Charlie when she did. Having seen pictures of Lucifer that Charlie had, they were close to consummate duplicates of one another, yet Charlie certainly got her range from her mom. The term, short lord, fit Lucifer like no other. Definitely. He had red skin however, and he was truly tall. Taller than Mr. Alastair even. Answered Forthright, having required a moment to consider it. Vaggie went to her better half, looking at her without flinching. Don't assume you have a sibling you didn't fill me in about. Charlie had a scrutinizing look all over. Perhaps. Look, I don't know it all, however I'm not the main youngster mother and father pursued for. As per Mother, Paradise reviled them, working everything out such that they could never have sound kids, or even have them. She let me know that she had a ton of stillborn infants. One night when she was stunningly tipsy, obviously, Paradise put that revile on them after their firstborn was conceived and afterward disappeared 3 days after the fact. Father looked through all of misery with the wrath 1,000 sons yet couldn't track down him. Perhaps that is him. She got done, a miserable look all over, that multitude of relatives, that multitude of family, gone on the grounds that Paradise was frightened of the youngsters her mother and father had and their true capacity, making her stop a few days was practically enough. Perhaps, at any rate, what was his name? Egg? Asked Vaggie, holding her sweetheart's hand when she turned around to the Egg Kid. She'd require her embraces later, that was without a doubt. He said he is Naruto Uzumaki, ma'am. He disappeared with Miss Carmine when she finished the gathering, announced the Egg, showing respect for the supervisor woman. Serpentious, figure you could organize a gathering among us and them? Asked Vaggie, going to confront the Egg Boai's chief. Most likely, however Carmilla will require a decent liaison for the gathering. Sheesh won't meet us gently, he answered, knowing Miss Carmilla was continuously searching for one more association with Damnation's high class, regardless of whether Charlie was the odd duck out. Lucifer clearly still cherished her, and there were not many with more cash or influence in Hellfire than the ruler, Cash. Perhaps Mammon, covetous fucker that he was, Power. Satan, the wrongdoing of Rage, was the main competitor. He was continuously persuading with Lucifer for the lead position on the power chain of command. He would even not like to be above all else, he simply needed to be the most grounded, said being top dog would prevent him from battling like he enjoyed as well. Call her, advise her it for weapons to arm and safeguard thee in against assaults of otherworldly assortment, assuming she says it's costly, tell her Lucifer is taking care of everything, and check whether that Naruto fellow is there as well, request that he come on the off chance that you would be able, said Vaggie, getting a gesture from Pentious, before he pulled out a steampunk-themed cell phone to call her. Even he could recognize the advantage of versatile interchanges. Vaggie in the meantime, turned around to her better half, you ought to likely call your father, darling, he'll need to be aware. Right. Charlie answered, following off toward the end, prior to taking out her telephone, and gazing at her dad's number, prior to shaking her head, assurance setting in to, ideally, discover some family. With restored energy, she hit the button. Just as the meeting ended, pulling the entryway shut behind him, he pivoted to confront the room, just for two bodies to influence him, sending him back a portion of a stage. Dad! Came the twin screeches of his young ladies, provoking a laugh from the fair master. Embracing them back, he turned around to their mom simultaneously. I see their sound, well. My solid young ladies, he cheered, getting them on his shoulders all the while, getting whimsical screeches from Clara and Odette simultaneously. Carmilla grinned at the sight. Her young ladies were just similar to this with their dad nowadays. So it gave her no deficiency of pleasure to see their immature sides rising up out of their serious personas they created for their work. It helped her to remember less distressing times, before the V's and their plans, before Alastair and his disarray, back when things were a smidgen more coordinated. They are, and what about you? Is it safe to say that you are eating sufficient food? Getting sufficient rest? She hassled, getting a laugh from Zestial and Naruto all the while. You're covering him, dearest Carmilla, he's clearly solid, unwind, guaranteed Zestial, sitting on one of the parlor seats and tasting his tea, partaking in the levity this family brought him. It's rare he enjoyed it, so when he did, he appreciated it. I'm fine, dear, truly. As a matter of fact I've never been better. Declared Naruto, getting his other half to feign exacerbation. The grin sneaked off his face be that as it may, and the young ladies were brought down from his shoulders delicately. When he next talked, his voice was delicate and calm. It was you, wasn't it? You killed that other exorcist. I did. We were out managing a minor issue, and the time moved away from us. When we understood what was occurring, we scrambled toward the closest protected house. However, before we made it, we were encircled. I sent the young ladies ahead to run while I held them off, and figured out how to kill one preceding I began running. That is the point at which the 5 gatekeepers you had watching us got up to speed and crushed the rest. They got up to speed and got us until the end of the eradication, she uncovered, frowning at him for the secret watchman, just for an unrepentant gaze to meet her own. Furthermore, in the event that I didn't make them watch you, all there's possibilities you'd be dead. I'm not gambling with it, possibly you, or our kids, Carmilla, I will not have it, he expressed, receiving a drained moan and gesture consequently. Moreover, they possibly meddle when your security isn't sufficient. They've just needed to meddle 2 times in the 50 years I've been away, before the killing. You'll make sense of those twice later, you in all actuality do understand that, right? I'm very much aware of my looming cross-examination, indeed, unwind, I'll send you the report sometime in the evening, he countered, prior to guaranteeing her of his arrangements for what's in store. Great, presently then, at that point, will you be requiring your customary weapons shipment? She asked, receiving a gesture from Naruto consequently. Definitely, the produce expert his subordinates actually need celestial steel to make undermined saintly steel. As a matter of fact, I could have to twofold the following shipment, perhaps triple it, will require a ton of radiant steel to arm my subordinates with tainted weapons, and that is all's excluding the ammunition creators, he said, getting a shaken head all the while. Can't get that without a serious cost climb, darling, that's what you know. Furthermore, on the off chance that I guaranteed 25% of the defiled steel weapons produced using each shipment are yours, alongside selective selling freedoms endlessly on undermined steel weapons, he traded, receiving a grin back consequently. I feel that can be sorted out. Arrangement, they fixed it with a handshake, as was custom in Heck. The room shined a dismal red from their joined power, before an agreement jumped out from between their hands with more than adequate composing currently on it, as a couple of words changed, and more sprung up on the base. The paper then moved back up and evaporated in a puff of smoke. As it did, Carmilla's telephone rang. Rapidly she arrived at over and got it, responding to it on speaker so that her believed individuals might be able to hear. This is Carmilla, what weapon could I at any point get for you? Miss Carmine, a delight, I approach sake of the Hazbin lodging, and Princess Morningstar specifically, came the murmuring voice of one of her better clients, Sir Pentious, getting a brought temple up in turn. He was dependably considerate and compensated fairly for his products, so she rather enjoyed the snake delinquent. It was the reason he had her number rather than the standard sellers. He was a decent, steadfast client. She got a kick out of the chance to buy and manage those. Also, what is it that the Princess of Agony need with my weapons, Sir Pentious? As may be obvious, she's a radical. For what reason does she need weapons? Addressed Carmilla. It depended on smell something. She not searching for weapons of a hellish assortment, yet a celestial one, perhaps even honest implied specifically for managing angels, he answered, getting an assortment of shared gazes from the room. That data shouldn't as yet have spilled, it was excessively fast. Furthermore, where did you hear this from? Could she at any point even manage the cost of that? Addressed Carmilla, doing a little looking for data. Alastair had a subordinate of mine at your gathering today unintentionally, and he told me and the princess of the procedures, or possibly the wide range of occasions, concerning the cash, Master Lucifer ISS paying. We might want to plunk down and have a legitimate conversation on the arrangement with yourself and the light honorable man. Is he accessible? He uncovered, receiving a squeezed extension of her nose consequently. She saw her accomplice, receiving a quiet gesture consequently. She gestured herself, prior to hanging back via telephone. He is. Where will this gathering be occurring? She asked, receiving a satisfied murmur consequently. The Hazbin lodging could be ideal. Master Lucifer will be available to supervise the arrangement. Meet us there in, say, 3 hours. We want an opportunity to set up and all, he proposed, getting a fulfilled gesture thus. 3 hours time at the Hazbin lodging, we'll be there, see you then Serpentius, she gestured prior to finishing the call and looking up at her accomplice. Well? What is your take? I think, there's sufficient time for me to take us to the phalanx and get the culinary experts to concoct us every one of a feast. We haven't eaten as a family together in so lengthy, time for that to change, young ladies, go snatch a difference in garments for formal clothing, we'll require it, he pronounced. Prior to guiding his young ladies from the room, going to his coach, he chose to offer him a dinner too. Will you be going along with us, Zestial? There's generally room at my table for you. I don't think so, I want to return to my regions, the V's are ever aggressive, and I need to hang tight on their interruptions until further notice, he answered, vanishing into himself as he disappeared. Naruto went to his other half, prior to offering her a hand. Will we, my dear? We will. Do you actually have that cook who does the new-made waffle fries with his steaks and burgers? I'm in the temperament for grill, she pronounced, receiving a smile consequently. I accept thus, indeed, he extended to a legitimate smoker a long time back and has been trying different things with various woods and meats from that point forward. I accept he was chipping away at briskets and ribs last I checked, he answered, getting an energized shudder at his words. Then, at that point, how about we get our young ladies and go? I'm not missing this. Obviously, dear. Back at the inn, around 30 minutes after the call finished. I talked with Miss Carmilla, she and the blondie man will be here in more than 2 hours, Serpentius announced, crawling up behind Vaggie to murmur it to her unobtrusively. Great, Charlie and her dad ought to have this all figured out by then, said Vaggie, following off while ill-defined yelling reverberated out of the secured room they had banished themselves in. It wasn't in no language she talked or perceived, meaning it probably been one of the old evil spirit dialects the higher honorability talked. Ideally, fingers crossed, they sound disturbed, spoke Pentius, truly trusting they could. Charlie was pleasant to him, the main individual in damnation to be pleasant to him as a matter of fact, and he wished her only cheerful news and favorable luck, aiding track down her sibling. Somehow, with her dad would be a decent spot to begin. In the room. How is it that you could call me here with this, Charlie? What's more, off the expression of a homunculus no less. Thundered Lucifer, his hair streaming like fire on top of his head. He was irate that his little girl, his daughter, would call him and let him know that his child may be alive, his child kid, his little man. Your sibling is dead, Charlie. I looked through each ring, each break and hole in damnation. He's gone. Furthermore, on the off chance that he isn't, how will you respond assuming he is as yet alive, and you botched the opportunity to see? Returned Charlie, her own hair acting like fire despite her dad's displeasure. She realized that the injury of their child's vanishing was as yet agonizing for her dad. Her mom guaranteed it hurt him far more detestable than it did her, yet to respond this way. It was rawer than she might have speculated. Isn't it worth actually trying? Regardless of whether he is gone, we can't simply surrender until we know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Any other way, he might in any case be out there. He isn't. Roared Lucifer, holding his stick sufficiently to twist the shaft under his solidarity with one hand, while the other hand concealed portion of his face, attempting to conceal the tears working in his eyes. Furthermore, assuming he is? Asked Charlie, seeing her dad was going to separate, he expected to let this out. Presently, before he snapped, her hair fell down to its not unexpected look, though without her hairbands to keep it coordinated. Then, at that point, I bombed him. Then, at that point, I neglected to track down my child. What's more, left him down here, alone, for quite some time. I bombed my significant other to find her child kid and I bombed my girl to track down her more established sibling. I bombed everybody I care about. What's more, on the off chance that I did, why in the world would he even need to know me, completed Lucifer, swiping his arm out towards her to point between her eyes, before he staggered in reverse and fell against the wall, sliding down and pulling his knees to his chest, slipping once more into English as he did, his hair falling around his face in a shaggy wreck, his cap tumbling off close to him. Charlie strolled straight dependent upon him, hunkered down before him, and snatched him by the shoulders, since he's family, since he's your child, and since, in such a case that I can excuse you, I'm certain he can, Father, there's an opportunity. Isn't that a sufficient motivation to attempt? Lucifer opened his eyes once more, and all he saw were, according to his little girl, eyes that looked such a lot of like his own, yet that radiance of affection in them. That intrinsic benevolence and brief look at her heart. That was all Lilith, she cherished profoundly and simply, and her heart spilled over with adoration for all of misery, something Charlie appears to have acquired more grounded than even her mom, seeing such unadulterated love in one of his bloodline. It helped him to remember the day the two his youngsters were conceived, of the affection he felt when he originally saw his youngsters, that adoration hadn't changed, even following one vanished for a long time, and Charlie. They were dealing with it. Point was, he needed to attempt, regardless of whether it was exclusively to prompt more catastrophe, he wouldn't abandon both of his children. Okay, I'll attempt, Charlie, he said, maneuvering her into a delicate embrace, covering his eyes into her shoulder. I won't abandon him in the event that you don't. Then we should prepare for their appearance. They'll be here 2 or 3 hours, she said, getting his cap and pulling him to his feet. When he stood up and cleaned his eyes of the leftovers of his tears, he took his offered cap back and returned it to its legitimate put on top of his head. Right, I'll tidy up the entryway and get it fit for a suitable gathering area, he told her, getting a marginally anxious thoroughly search in turn. He simply grinned at that. Unwind, I'm about to clean up and placed in an adequate table for a gathering like this to occur on, in the event that it's anything less. They won't treat it in a serious way. Get your barkeep on reserve, advise him to get a rundown of beverages he really wants load of, and I'll evoke it for him, and get Holy Messenger residue to remain in his room. The last thing we want is him meddling or offending your visitors. They're probably going to kill him assuming he does. After 2 hours, an acceptably enormous table had been set up in the section lobby, one that covered a decent piece of the floor space. Waiting around pausing, were Lucifer, Charlie, Vaggie and Alastair. Serpentius was by the entryway, holding back to welcome their visitors and present everybody, seeing as he was the only one the two sides knew. Husker was behind the bar, coordinating his new stockpile of alcohol. Graciousness of Lucifer, a marginally blissful glimmer in his eye as he did. He had more than adequate stock of fine alcohol and wine, solid and very much matured containers of bourbon and scotch, and select brews of both huge brand lagers and specialty lagers. He was a cheerful camper with this determination accessible to him, not any more modest poo. They ought to be here soon. Is everybody prepared? Asked Lucifer, getting gestures from Charlie and Vaggie, while Alastair simply kept on grinning, unimaginative prick. As he was going to begin a verbal competing coordinate with the radio dickhead, there was a firm thumping on the entryway. Looking among themselves, they squared their shoulders as they heard Serpentius welcome their visitors prior to welcoming them in. That is the point at which they saw them. Carmilla and her girls had traded their typical clothing for a higher class of attire, Carmilla and Odette wearing proper matching suits and skirts in their favored varieties, while Clara was wearing a long, lower leg-length dull red dress. The man at the front anyway drew their consideration the most. He stayed in his shield from prior. Just now he had traded his shadowy shroud for a profound red cape, one that undulated like water and moved from his shoulders like a stream of blood, with a radiant middle class of fur around the sides and back of his neck. He strolled straight up to them four, and bowed officially at the midriff to Lucifer. Before he stooped and kissed both Charlie and Vaggie on the knuckles of their offered hands, rising, he offered his hand to Alastair, receiving a shaken hand consequently. With a thoughtful grin for the occupants in general, he went to confront the ruler and princess of misery. Your effortlessness, princess, thank you for the chance to meet and examine a strategic plan, he opened, getting a grin from Lucifer for his regard, exactly the same thing that got a humiliated blush and laugh from Charlie. Regard out the door. I will appreciate working with you, I do accept. Remarked Lucifer, getting an entertained laugh and a grin from the reinforced evil spirit before him, one that hardened the spine of Lucifer, regardless of whether he gave no visual hints to it. For what reason couldn't it? He saw precisely the same grin on his own face for 10,000 years in the mirror. Will we sit then, Master Uzumaki? We have a lot to examine, offered Lucifer, getting one more grin and a gesture from the strong master. The two gatherings moved to find a seat at the table, with Lucifer and Naruto each sitting at the head of one or the other side of the table. How might we open this then? Goodness, stand by, I got it. Beverages and presentations first, then we can continue to the genuine discussions, Husker. Called Lucifer, getting a look from Carmilla before she saw the previous master drawing nearer to take drink demands. Husker, is that you? I've been looking all around the Pride Ring for you. Your rewards from the yearly poker game are as yet being held for you, you stupid Tom Feline, fumed Carmilla, getting Husker to fall down behind his notebook from his apprehension about Carmilla's anger. I'll be by to get them in the not-so-distant future, I guarantee, he swore, getting a fulfilled gesture from the dark swan of misery. Seeing her gesture, he fixed himself up prior to requesting orders. Lucifer had a basic margarita, Charlie requested a frappuccino, Alastair requested some Irish espresso, while Vaggie had a glass of water. Naruto, then again, requested a container of bourbon and a glass for it, saying he would pour for himself. Carmilla requested a glass of red wine and to leave the jug, while Clara and Odette declined a beverage, professing to not be parched. I get it was my thought, so I'll begin. All of you know me, I'm the huge supervisor of misery itself, Lucifer Morningstar himself, opened Lucifer, happily. Howdy, I'm Charlie Morningstar, and I'm the Princess of Agony and pioneer behind the Hazbin lodging, spoke Charlie, welcoming her visitors with her own abnormal appeal that had Lucifer, Naruto and Carmilla grinning at her. I'm Vaggie, Charlie's sweetheart and the supervisor of the Hazbin lodging, spoke Vaggie, seeing as she was the following in the line of individuals to present themselves on their side of the table. The name is Alastair, I'm the radio devil, and head of safety and office chief here at the Hazbin Inn, enchanted to meet you, came the radio-separated voice of the master that Charlie decided to work with. He was grinning extra firmly at the present time, seeing as the blade that killed that holy messenger was still on Naruto's back. The sheath, notwithstanding, facilitated his grin a piece to make it look more regular. Surmise I'll begin for our side then. At that point, the name is Naruto Uzumaki, I'm known as the Master of War, and the expert of the Dull organization. Joy to meet you, Naruto started, before half filling his glass and taking a sound taste from it. The Dull organization. Unfortunately I've never known about it, asked Charlie, just for her to make sense of on the look she got from the protected evil spirit across the table, getting a shrug and a clarification for her difficulty. Not an issue, we haven't precisely been dynamic in the 200 or 300 years, we're principally a hired fighter organization, the chief one in each of the 7 rings of misery at that, when you need the best and won't hesitate to hand over the money to pay it, we're the organization you call. We have taken agreements from each of the 7 rings, and in any event, for the greater part of the wrongdoings, uncovering Mammon and Satan, made sense of Naruto, getting takes a gander at refusing assistance excessively 2 of the transgressions, to which he made sense of, Satan was denied on the grounds that were in fact contenders, his own workers being, in fact, his soldiers of fortune. Mammon was denied after his very first agreement again in light of the fact that he neglected to maintain his end and never conveyed the settled upon sum. When we squeezed the issue, he took steps to involve his status as a transgression and have us obliterated, otherwise known as, he's a modest bastard and didn't pay what he owed, so presently he's prohibited. Presently, I accept the beautiful woman close to me still can't seem to present herself. I go by Carmilla Carmine, master arms seller, and one of the main individuals in damnation with the capacity to reshape superb arms. It is a delight to make your colleague, presented Carmilla, as she easily stood up and gave a legitimate bow, prior to waving to her 2 little girls close to her. This is Clara and Odette Carmine, my twin little girls, presented Carmilla, her little girls standing and appropriately bowing, similarly as she had shown them as well. I figured delinquents could never have kids. Asked Vaggie, getting a shrug from the 2 masters across the table. Didn't prevent us from having them, clearly, addressed Naruto, everything except getting Lucifer's doubts, valid. Miscreants could never have children together, yet they might have them with damnation conceived evil presences. The 2 sorts of devils simply didn't get to connect much in light of the division he had placed in with binding delinquents to the pride ring and consequently, holding the eliminations to the pride ring, which made ordinary hellfire conceived avoid it like it was one of his sicknesses. Hold up, hold up, hold up, they're your children. Addressed Charlie, getting an odd look from the heavily clad master. All in all, is that right? Neither Carmilla nor I precisely attempted to conceal our marriage, we simply didn't declare it from the rooftop tops, we just kept our regions separate since that way cash stays a-moving between her area and my own. Furthermore, this way neither of us is exhausted, answered Naruto, lifting his past on hand and evaporating his glove to uncover his hand and the brilliant wedding ring on his ring finger. Eyes moved to Carmilla, who lifted her own left hand also uncover a matching wedding ring. Yet again very few who esteem the pledges of marriage in damnation, remarked Lucifer, receiving shrugs consequently. In our particular organizations, our promises are of the utmost importance, our item and administrations are just worth however much our standing in given word, we need to stay true to our promise, and as such we figure out the worth of pledges and given promises, made sense of Carmilla, getting gesture and looks of understanding from the remainder of the group. In any case, on to business, you have the weapons and powers to keep this spot safe and kill any exorcists that look to go after it, as far as I can tell, asked Lucifer, getting a gesture from the fair. Indeed to the 2 inquiries, I have the numbers to hold this spot, and I have the weapons underway to kill heavenly messengers. I have one here with me, on the off chance that you might want to see it, offered Naruto, getting a gesture from the Hazbin bunch. With their endorsement given, Naruto stood up and pulled his sword from its sheath, a similar quality of dread and demise indeed occupying the room. It made Charlie and Vaggie particularly awkward, while Alaster appeared totally unbothered. Lucifer, be that as it may, forcefully remained from his seat, sending it back onto the floor. Where did you track down that sword? Where did you track down the Warmaker? His words were delicate, cold and risky, on the off chance that he wasn't told now, and with full genuineness, somebody was going to kick the bucket. A broke ruin, far on the edges of the Pride Ring, nearly stepping into a wild area, Naruto answered, getting a stone-colored gaze from Lucifer, assuming that it helps. The element that was watching it is gone at this point. How? I realize what was watching that, so how could you kill it? He attempted to have me, clearly, he fizzled, and I remain, answered Naruto, a bleak dislike his face, the grimace a mirror match for the disapprove of Lucifer's face. You, consumed Korn. Inconceivable, even my dad couldn't achieve such a feat, denied Lucifer, shaking his head at the idea. It is following 10,000 years of lacking legitimate love and yours and the wrongdoings activities, and no killings don't count, it's not genuine blood all things considered, only an otherworldly entertainment, which he disdained, made sense of Naruto, getting a shrug thus, so signal from Lucifer, before the two of them saw Charlie lift her hand. Sorry for interfering, yet who or what is Korn? She asked, which separated from the two before her, no one appeared to be aware. The old evil spirit and the fallen holy messenger looked at one another somewhere off to the side, before Lucifer moaned and waved Naruto on, conjuring up another seat and plunking down as he did. Naruto sheathed his sword, prior to plunking down himself. Korn was one of the four divine forces of the twist, the domain of presence that in the end became damnation after the heavenly messenger's obstruction and Lucifer giving humankind freedom of thought. Used to be the cosmic system was loaded with life, fierce life at that, and it cleared itself out. Korn was one of the parts of life in that time. The divine force of homicide, blood and savagery, he who once sat on a metal-privileged position on a pile of commendable skulls, and ostensibly, was the most grounded of the four at the hour of their defeat, when the twist was effectively moved into the plains of misery, north of 10 million years since the last conscious species was dynamic. And your dad and the wrongdoings who favored him were expelled here, them seven were liable for clearing their impact off of most of agony, exposing the extremely external reaches. The first to fall was Slainish, the ruler of delight and master of unspeakable overabundance, the most youthful and seemingly the one with the most potential, yet in general the most fragile. The second to fall was Tsench, the master of enchantment and the lord of destiny. Third was the divine force of death, sicknesses, and obliteration, Nurgle. Korn was the last to fall, the master of homicide and lord of war, holding out the longest of them four. Everything except the most far ranges of the domain of agony were taken from them, and their places of worship were demolished and consumed. I found what was possible the last sanctuary in hellfire to Korn, where I expect your dad had locked him away with his blade and entered the sanctum. The excess substance of Korn, what little was left, attempted to assume command over my body, with an end goal to have an actual structure to start recovering his own solidarity. Scarcely, just barely scarcely, yet I figured out how to oppose him and consume what was left of his spirit. In doing as such, I learned numerous things, including the key to ruin saintly steel. Came the long clarification of how Naruto found and took in the remainder of Korn's quintessence. Surmise I'll activate for our ancillary then. At that point, the name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm accepted as the adept of war, and the able of the dull organization. Joy to accommodated you, Naruto started, before bisected bushing his bottle and demography a complete aftertaste from it. The dull organization. Unfortunately I've never accepted about it, asked Charlie, aloof for her to accomplish faculty of on the attending she got from the adequate angry spirit beyond the table, accepting a absolve and a description for her difficulty. Not an issue, we haven't absolutely been activating in the 200 or 300 years, we're principally a assassin fighter organization, the arch one in anniversary of the 7 rings of misery at that, when you charge the best and won't alternate to duke over the money to pay it, we're the alignment you call. We acquire taken agreements from anniversary of the 7 rings, and in any event, for the greater allotment of the wrongdoings, apprehension Mammon and Satan, fabricated faculty of Naruto, accepting takes a ankle at abnegation abetment badly 2 of the transgressions, to which he fabricated faculty of. Satan was denied on the breadth that were in actuality contenders, his own workers being, in fact, his soldiers of fortune. Mammon was denied afterwards his absolute aboriginal acceding afresh in a blaze of the actuality that he alone to advance his end and never conveyed the acclimatized aloft sum, when we awkward the issue. He took accomplished to absorb his cachet as a transgression and acquire us obliterated, otherwise accepted as, he's a bashful adulterated and didn't pay what he owed, so anon he's prohibited, presently, I acquire the admirable woman abutting to me still can't accept to present herself. I go by Carmilla Carmine, adept arms seller, and one of the capital individuals in damnation with the accommodation to adapt superb arms. It is a contentment to accomplish your colleague, presented Carmilla, as she calmly stood up and gave an accepted bow, above mentioned to bouncing to her two little girls abutting to her. This is Clara and Odette Carmine, my accompanying little girls, presented Carmilla, her little girls continuing and appropriately bowing, analogously as she had apparent them as well. I ample delinquents could never acquire kids. Asked Vaggie, accepting a absolve from the two masters beyond the table. Didn't anticipate us from accepting them, clearly, addressed Naruto, aggregate accepting Lucifer's doubts, valid, miscreants could never acquire accouchement together, yet they ability acquire them with damnation conceived angry presences. The two sorts of devils artlessly didn't get to affix abundant in a blaze of the analysis he had placed in with bounden delinquents to the pride arena and consequently, captivation the eliminations to the pride ring, which fabricated accustomed hellfire conceived abstain it like it was one of his sicknesses. Hold up, authority up, they're your children. Addressed Charlie, accepting an odd attending from the heavily clad master. All in all, is that right? Neither Carmilla nor I absolutely attempted to burrow our marriage, we artlessly didn't acknowledge it from the rooftop tops, we aloof kept our regions abstracted aback that way banknote stays effective amid her breadth and my own, furthermore, this way neither of us is exhausted, answered Naruto. Appropriation his anesthetized on Duke and abbreviating his cuff to bear his Duke and the ablaze bells arena on his arena finger, eyes confused to Carmilla, who Ariel her own larboard Duke additionally bear a analogous bells ring. Yet a fresh absolute few who admire the pledges of alliance in damnation, remarked Lucifer, accepting shrugs consequently. In our accurate organizations, our promises are of the absolute importance, our account and administrations are aloof account about abundant our continuing and accustomed word, we charge to break accurate to our promise, and as such we amount out the account of pledges and accustomed promises, fabricated faculty of Carmilla, accepting action and looks of compassionate from the butt of the group. In any case, assimilate business, you acquire the weapons and admiral to accumulate this atom safe and annihilate any exorcists that attending to go afterwards it, as far as I can tell, asked Lucifer, accepting a action from the fair. Indeed to the two inquiries, I acquire the numbers to authority this spot, and I acquire the weapons underway to annihilate adorable messengers, I acquire one actuality with me, on the off adventitious that you ability appetite to see it, offered Naruto, accepting a action from the Hazbin bunch. With their endorsement given, Naruto stood up and pulled his brand from its sheath, a agnate affection of alarming and annihilation absolutely application the room, it fabricated Charlie and Vaggie decidedly awkward, while Alaster appeared absolutely unbothered. Lucifer be that as it may, angrily remained from his seat, sending it aback assimilate the floor. Where did you clue bottom ward that sword? Area did you clue bottom ward the war maker, his words were delicate, algid and risky, on the off adventitious that he wasn't told now, and with abounding genuineness, somebody was activity to bang the bucket. A bankrupt ruin, far on the edges of the pride ring, nearly dispatch into a agrarian area, Naruto answered, accepting a stone-colored boring from Lucifer, assuming that it helps, the aspect that was watching it is gone at this point. How? I apprehend what was watching that, so how could you annihilate it? He attempted to acquire me, clearly, he fizzled, and I remain, answered Naruto, a austere animosity his face, the face a mirror bout for the blame of Lucifer's face. You, captivated Korn. Inconceivable, even my dad couldn't accomplish such a feat, denied Lucifer, afraid his arch at the idea. It is afterward 10,000 years of defective accepted adulation and castigation in the wrongdoings activities, and no killings don't count, it's not 18-karat claret all things considered, alone an adorable entertainment, which he disdained, fabricated faculty of Naruto, accepting a absolve appropriately, so, arresting from Lucifer. Afore the two of them saw Charlie lift her hand. Sorry for interfering, yet who or what is Korn? She asked, which afar from the two afore her, no one appeared to be aware. The old angry spirit and the collapsed angelic agent looked at one addition about off to the side, afore Lucifer moaned and coiled Naruto on, abracadabra up addition bench and plunking bottom ward as he did, Naruto sheathed his sword, above mentioned to plunking bottom ward himself. Korn was one of the four all-powerful armament of the twist, the area of attendance that in the end became damnation afterwards the adorable messenger's obstruction and Lucifer giving humankind abandon of thought, used to be the Catholic arrangement was loaded with life, angry activity at that, and it austere itself out. Korn was one of the genitalia of activity in that time, the all-powerful force of homicide, claret and savagery, he who already sat on a metal-advantaged position on an accumulation of admirable skulls, and ostensibly, was the best ashore of the four at the hour of their defeat, when the twist was finer confused into the plains of misery. Arctic of 10 actor years aback the aftermost acquainted breed was dynamic, and your dad and the wrongdoings who advantaged him were expelled here, them 7 were accountable for allowance there a pulse off of best of agony, advertisement the acutely alien reaches, the aboriginal to abatement was slainish, the adjudicator of contentment and adept of abominable overabundance, the best active and acutely the one with the best potential, yet in accepted the best fragile, the additional to abatement was tsench, the adept of attraction and the aristocrat of destiny, third was the all-powerful force of death, sicknesses, and obliteration, Nurgle. Korn was the aftermost to fall, the adept of assassination and aristocrat of war captivation out the longest of them four, aggregate except the best far ranges of the area of affliction were taken from them, and their places of adoration were burst and consumed. I begin what was accessible the aftermost altar in hellfire to Korn. Area I apprehend your dad had bound him abroad with his brand and entered the sanctum, the balance actuality of Korn, what little was left, attempted to accept command over my body, with an end ambition to acquire an absolute anatomy to alpha convalescent his own solidarity, scarcely, aloof almost scarcely, yet I ample out how to argue him and absorb what was larboard of his spirit, in accomplishing as such, I abstruse abundant things, including the key to ruined saintly steel, came the long, continued description of how Naruto began and took in the butt of Korn's quintessence.